Hello and welcome to this session of our launch of a very interesting podcast that we have on our platform on Storytel. This podcast is with Dr. Shishir Palsapure. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, Suramita. I'm well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, and I'm very glad to be doing this podcast with you. And of course, that we have launched this series on Storytel. Let me just tell everybody that this whole podcast is about a series of mental health disorders that a person goes through, or all those mental health issues that the world is seeing today. And what Dr. Palsapuri has tried to do here, of course, this is not a kind of a prescription for as what you would go to a clinical psychologist or a psychotherapy session, but these are some of the very meaningful advices and some action points for these mental health issues, how it should be handled. So, before we go and talk further about these, I would really want to introduce Dr. Shishir Pasapure. I've had my privilege to actually have been in a couple of sessions with him, and in fact, I had a wonderful opportunity to even work with him, which I couldn't, but I was very at a point of time involved with mental health issues and. Dr. Palsapuri, I've learned a lot from him, and it was my quite an honor for us to have him doing the podcast series for us here on Storytel. So, talking about him, he is basically a trained psychotherapist, a trainer, and a supervisor for mental health professionals, and he's been trained at the Beck Institute and the Albert Ellis Institute, USA. And he is one of the most renowned psychotherapists that we have here today. And thank you so much for doing this series with Storytel, sir. And yes, I would like to know from you as we begin our session today that the world is seeing mental health issues rising from time to time, and especially after COVID, there are a lot of different kind of issues, mental health issues like depression, anxiety, stress, and all that we are seeing all around the world. So what is your take on it? Why is it that are we so unable to cope with the situation around us? Isn't that the brain that we've been given and the mind, which is so many years old, is already equipped with certain ways of working? Why is it that we are becoming so much in need of help, or psychotherapy or psychiatric?
All right. Okay. First of all, thank you, Suramita, for this opportunity to be live with the audience, and also a great platform, Storytel, to have my first podcast published. I'm really privileged to be on Storytel now. Now, answering your question, I view your question as why have mental health issues worsened after COVID? There are many reasons. First of all, a lot of adversities have come together with COVID. For instance, the lockdowns for that matter, they reduced our total activity. So when we were in a lockdown, we did not move about much. Now reduced activity, then reduced stimulation to you. For instance, you're looking at the same environment over and over again. Then financial loss, then some people lost their loved ones, some people lost their support system, some people lost jobs, some people lost a means to kind of commute, or there were so many different adversities that were put together at the same time. Now many of us go through these adversities one after other, and then we're able to cope with them. But when all of these came together, any pandemic for that matter would have, or a war situation for that matter, would have all these put together. And this is the time of a crisis when mental health issues surge because all the adversities come together, number one. Number two, the resources to cope with them deplete. So people become vulnerable to psychiatric disorders, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, adjustment disorder. All these things definitely rise during adversities like this. Another reason why mental health issues have risen is probably because of the COVID virus itself. Now, we have been seeing a lot of post COVID complications that affect neurological, that affect the brain, that affect the spinal cord, that affect various organs. Now, when they affect so many things, we also have seen a rise of psychiatric disorders after COVID. So that may have to do with the adversities during COVID. That may also have to do with the infection itself. So a lot of people who were infected also are coming up. Now, what I have seen in my personal practice, and also a lot of mental health professionals would agree, that old patients have started coming back with similar disorders. New patients have started having disorders, but they are of a huge, they are of not just mild to moderate intensity, but they are pretty severe, that they have come up with. And this is just the beginning. I would say the mental health issues are going to rise in the coming few years, not just because it was a prediction by World Health Organization, but this pandemic has added fuel to it, and the mental health issues are going to be on rise in the coming few years unless we do something about it.
Mm. Of course, yes, there is a crisis that we faced in the last 2 years, and of course, a lot of people are still actually reeling through the after effects of it. We are still not totally out of it, but even mental health was at rise even before COVID. I would say, apart from the crisis, of course, there are crises of a pandemic, there are crises of the war which we are seeing today. But isn't human beings aren't human beings are in a state of existence which is completely always of fear? Either it is of fear or of uncertainty or of certain kind of peer pressure. So I would like you to tell us that what is that starts it. What is it that from a child is born, I mean, it gets all the nutrients of the body and the mind. So what are these things that really triggers in a human being? Of course, looking at all the societal issues around, what is it that triggers that we are not being able to cope with the world around us?
That's a very complex question. I would say the whole purpose of human life is existence again. Now, there is no predetermined purpose to it, but I think um, uh, procreation would be another purpose of human existence. So, anything that comes in the way of human existence, or probably your safety, that needs to be eliminated from the environment, and we start seeing the world through the window of survival, right? And this is where we have these basic primal emotions, what we call as the primal emotions are anger, anxiety or fear, and then depression. So these are three basic primal emotions that are necessary for survival. Of course, there are other emotions as well that are necessary for survival, but these three emotions, and then the mix and match of all these emotions, would help you survive and be happier. Now, if you ask me why do we fall into mental health issues, there are multiple answers to it. I would say there are three primary influencers when it comes to mental health issues. The first one is biological, which means something that has to do with your body, the brain, the chemicals that are in your body. So, including microscopic level, which is genetics, your hormones, your your chromosomes and so on. So anything that has to do with the biology is biological aspect. Second is the environmental aspect, which is what happens with you, what has happened with you, what will happen to you in future. So a pandemic like this is an environmental trigger. War is an environmental trigger. For some people it's a breakup, that's an environmental trigger. For some people it's losing a job or a loved one would be a trigger. So environmental factors, anything that's outside you, would be considered. And third is your cognition, the way you think, the way you process information. When all these three come together, they give you a picture of either a physical disorder, for instance diabetes or hypothyroidism, and mental health issues like depression or anxiety or any for that matter. So it's always a combination of bio, psycho, social factors. So it's environmental factors, biological factors, and the cognitive, your thinking habits. They all contribute together to presenting a mental health problem. Now, in cognition, we also look at skills. So the way you think about yourself, the way you think about the world and problems, and also certain skills, for instance, being assertive, being able to stand up for yourself, managing time well, problem solving, crisis management, all these skills that can be learned, we all consider them in the cognitive factors. So this is how, some people are able to be resilient towards these adversities, and some people have significant symptoms or emotional distress or emotional upset that we can label as disorder because it's affecting their functioning. So I hope this answers your question.
Absolutely. Very, very wonderfully you have, with much clarity, you have answered this. I would then, that question actually would lead me to the next one, which is, at what point of time does one seek out for help? Because all of us are in a state of, okay, okay, am I doing it right or wrong? Or can I actually do something about the situation or the problem that I'm facing? If there is a problem with the mind itself, can the mind itself cure it? So, at what
All right.
point does one look for like this kind of help?
I would say kindergarten. Kindergarten. The earlier we start learning mental health management skills, the better. I would say, as someone learns to learn language, they learn different subjects at school. They
Mm,
need to learn the mental health skills that are mental health hygiene skills, that are, thinking skills, rational thinking skills. Of course, we do learn them without formal education as well, right? We learn through modeling, we learn through experience. But the earlier we start a formal education in this, the better. Having said that, we do not still have a lot of mental health training programs in schools, although I did start one 8 years back. But we still do not have it all over the world, for instance. So the one would be prevention, is preventing these mental health issues right in the beginning from school. And when someone does understand that they are being, they're feeling distressed, they are not functioning well as much as they would like to, they are not being as productive in relationships or work or any other area, it is time to seek help or assistance or coaching, I would say, for these problems. So proper evaluation of your emotions, your behaviors, your thinking needs to be done. Or when someone else suggests that there is something off or something odd that I see, and I think you need assistance. So you may not have an insight always that I need help. When someone else points out, then it is time to reach out. So the earlier the better. It's like, you would go to a dentist every 6 months just to prevent problems. You would go to a cardiologist or a physician every year, for instance, to prevent problems. It is important to have a mental health checkup as well every 6 months. And if you think that you are distressed beyond reasonable time, if your functioning is affected at relationships or at home or at work or academics, any area of your life, it is time for seeking assistance, because mental health professionals are trained professionals to deal with something as simple as development. For instance, you want to develop further, you're normal but you want to develop further. You're distressed, which is the second D. There's something wrong has happened with you, and then you're upset about it, you want to work on that distress. And third is disorder, whether you have a diagnosed or undiagnosed disorder.
yeah.
So you may just want to develop further. A simple habit like how to stop procrastination, how to be regular at the gym. These are the issues that we can help you with. Second is distress, like something has happened, you had a breakup or you lost your job, and then you feel upset about it. You don't have a disorder, but you still would like to seek assistance. And someone who has been really affected by these issues for a long time, or a significant level of distress, that's the time when you can also approach a therapist. The earlier, the better.
This is a very wonderful thing to hear, that we are not actually talking about only that when you have a certain disorder that you go for mental health experts. You can also develop something within your own
Absolutely.
cognitive skills, or you can actually seek help when you're into certain distress, which could be just temporary. But and I see that you are doing a wonderful work at Morphic Minds, and there are so many people. And I should just tell everyone that Morphic Minds is one of the institutions that Dr. Palsapure has opened up, and he's doing this consultancy for a really really long time and helped many people. Uh, that brings me to this question: that isn't is still mental health, I mean, seeking mental health experts is a taboo in our society. Because here we are talking about not only going for disorders, but we are also talking about improving your cognitive skills. So, what is your take on that?
Things are rapidly changing. I would look at the brighter side. Seeking help in general is looked down upon. It could be physical health, it could be mental health. you know um, you don't talk to your friends about your problems, leave alone mental health professionals.
Uh,
So seeking help, we have always been hesitant about. Talking about our problems is again an additional problem, because some people view you as incapable or weak for
mm,
not being able to handle your own problems. In fact, I only look at it as a skill deficit. So though I say that I treat disorders, but at the end of it, I think that I only trained people into learning skills, how to deal things better, how to manage your emotions better, how to modify your habits better. It's all
mm,
skills training, besides the treatment of disorders, which could be because of with medication, but it's largely skills training that mental health professionals do.
wonderful.
And if you did not know math, you would join a coaching class. If you wanted to learn guitar, you would join a coaching class. So I think we do not hesitate to seek out for training in terms of a subject or a skill, artistic skill. In fact, mental health issues, dealing with them is a skill. And mental health professionals teach you those skills. They are trained, super trained, supervised into how to teach them. And that's how I think the attitude would change once you start looking at the scope of mental health professionals, that it's largely skills training. And
Mm,
nobody is born with a skill except for breathing air and the suckling reflex that we have. Rest everything is learned over a period of time. So why not learn these skills from a developed science, from people who have already been trained into doing this?
mm, mm. And of course, why not when it comes to improving your own life, where we are all working towards, improving our own selves. But tell me, this whole urgency or the tendency to improve us, to be better, to be good, to be looked as somebody who's successful. Why are we all under so much peer pressure? Why do we have to? Why is the society made in a way that we all, and isn't that one of the reasons why even this mental, like I know so many people who are going through so much of anxiety issues because of the sheer peer pressure that they feel from the environment around.
I do not call it peer pressure. I call it peer influence. Now, peer influence could be really good. Um, let's look at ourselves millions of years back when we were just evolving, right? And one of these people, let's say that we were hunters or gatherers or probably farmers, and one of these people gets bitten by a snake, and suffers because of the snake bite. And this person says that stay away from snakes. Anything that looks like this, stay away from them. And there is a group of people who had seen the person suffering, and now they all stay away from snakes. And but you don't, you are not afraid of snakes. Now, if you were not really influenced by these peers, you would probably die out, right? Because you would probably be friendly with snakes. And then you might die out because you did not get influenced by the peers. And this is how peer influence, like, influencing one another, has helped us survive, right? So I think peer influence is necessary for survival. However, in the today's world, how many times have we been warned by other people, and then we it saved us a lot of trouble, right? So we I look at peer influence as something very necessary for happiness and survival. However, we can also get into peer pressure, so-called negative peer pressure, where we try to fit in into the society's structure, and this fitting in may not always be counterproductive, but sometimes it does have a huge cost associated with it. For instance, if I were to travel to a different nation, I would first like to know how their culture is, and I would like to fit in there, right? If I don't, then I might get ridiculed and ostracized by their society, or I might get into practical trouble. So
Hmm.
fitting in would have advantages. but I might also go out of my way to fit in and then pay a huge cost for it. So this is the time when you pay more costs than get the benefits out of fitting in. That's when we think that we get into problems like this. For instance,
Mm.
let's social media is a very good example where you see everyone else being more successful, happier in relationships or at work, because they post stories like that and post posts like that. So we get into an impression that I need to match up with these people, and then you
Mm.
might spend enormous amount of money or energies into matching up, and that's when you start straining your resources, and that's when
Yeah.
you fall prey to mental health issues. So I would say peer influence in itself is not bad, but if you do not do a cost benefit analysis, you might end up into mental health issues while matching up with people or standing out from people as well, right?
Mm.
Both these things have a cost to it. Mental health is one of the costs people pay.
Very interesting you said this, because that means that the snake example that you gave, that the mind was only instrumental to act when there are survival procedures, when it's required. But what we have done is we have taken those and build up our own castles with thoughts and everything, and then we have put like goals and bars and yardsticks to our own lives, and
Absolutely.
then and
You're right.
that what has actually led us to this. Interesting. Social media, of course, I think is something that is very, very much responsible, I would say. But again, at the same time, there are so many connections that are built through social media. Lives are made, companies are formed, lifelong friendships are made. So I think that's also an interesting balance that one needs to look at. We have a question here: is social media giving us more problems rather than solving them? It started well, but now I feel it has become a menace. What you have to say about this?
Oh, this is a debate. Now, social media in itself has not given us problems. It's as simple as, has fire or firearms or electricity or knives or scalpels have given us more problems than they have solved. Now, this is a very difficult question. The way we use a tool is going to decide how it is helpful or to what extent it's harmful. So I would say both. Social media has given us immense reach, and it has given us innumerable advantages. The same I would say with plastics. Say for instance, have plastics improved our life, or they have harmed us in more ways? So it's a tricky question like that. Both. The answer is both. Yes. So how you use social media makes a lot of difference. The sad part of it is nobody is educated formally into how to use social media and how not to use, specifically when it comes to mental health. So interestingly, we had a discussion in the schools, in classrooms, about how to process social media information and how not to process it, and these students were completely shocked to know the truth behind social media. We showed them some videos, and we gave them some tips how to deal with such information, and they said that yes, this is our problem. We did not know how to process the positive information that we get, and there is also negative information that we get on social media. We did not know how to process it. So to answer the audience's question, has social media given us more problems? I would say both. It has also resolved a lot of issues, but the way you use it can make you more vulnerable to problems. The way you use it can make you benefit from it more than it has a problem. But every single thing probably out today has a plus side and a downside to it.
So it is basically, you're saying that it is upon us that how we use mind as a tool to survive, not kind of go beyond it, which most of the time we do. And here we are also talking about, as you were sharing some data with me earlier, that in that I saw that some substance abuse was one of the most
Yes.
biggest mental health issue that we are facing in the world today. And why do you think so? Because is it like a form of an escapism from the reality or the harsh reality of life, that we get into substance abuse and stuff like that?
Again, three factors: biological factors, environmental factors, and your own thinking factors. Now, addictions have been there forever, kind of, since we invented anything that could, change, alter your state of mind. So, we all use a substance every single day, and it's the largest used drug. Drug is any substance that alters your physiological or psychological state. Can you tell me which is the drug which is largely used in the world today? Which is the most frequently used drug in the world today?
You mean a substance that I would talk about, like something that to eat or drink?
Yes, and that would alter your state of mind or body.
Because I've heard the podcast. I remember you saying it was caffeine.
Okay, so tell us.
Was it caffeine?
Yes, it is caffeine. Caffeine is the most used drug in the world. Now, as simple as that. However, caffeine is not really very harmful to the body, or caffeine use is not so harmful. I would say that behavioral addictions, like doing something over and over again to get the pleasure, and substance use, using a substance, it could be a chemical, it could be a drug, or it could be anything that alters your state of mind. So these have been there forever. Now, I would say escapism is just a small part of it. The large part of it is dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical in the brain that gives you a feeling, a feel good feeling. It could be a reward feeling, it could be a pleasure feeling. Now, any behavior or any substance that gives you a surge of dopamine in your brain is likely to be consumed or done over and over and over again. So this is the basic mechanism of brain to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And it's learning that we learn through operant conditioning that this gives me pleasure, I would do it over and over again. Now, when it comes to addictions, we're talking about use of such things as a primary mode of gaining pleasure and happiness, and at the expense, at the choice of other helpful activities. So it could be, someone derives pleasure from activities or a substance when they know that their relationships or work or academics or any other functioning is impaired or affected by it. So this could be abuse, and then getting dependent on it could be another issue, that you start getting negative symptoms if you do not have it, and then it becomes dysfunctional more and more and more. It starts affecting your life more and more. So why do we do this again? One is basic, the mechanism of dopamine and learning, which is operant conditioning, and of course, genetics play a huge role. Adverse life events play a huge role in the development of substance use. For instance, adverse childhood events have been linked to substance use in adults. So we know that there are multiple factors. So we cannot put your finger on one factor that leads to addictions, but there are a host of factors, and this is so important to know, for a clinician to know to how to treat these disorders, and also a person who is going through addictions to know that there's no single factor, but the person is fully responsible themselves for doing something about it. So leave alone the factors, leave it to the clinician, but take a step towards getting over or dealing with these addictions better, so that you can improve your quality of life.
Mm. Wonderful. Because these are external factors which are coming in our lives to kind of disrupt the life that is being lived. There is an external help which is needed to, because
Not all external factors, there are internal factors as well. The way you think also makes a difference, right?
yeah.
So I remember a story, a popular anecdote. There were two brothers, and they were born to the same father, and they were twins, technically twins. And one of them grew up to be an alcoholic, and one of them did not touch alcohol all his life, right?
Mm.
And when asked, the one who grew up as alcoholic, he was asked, "Hey, how did you become an alcoholic?" So he said, "I watched my father as I grew up." And then, the other guy was asked, how did you become so successful and never touch alcohol ever in your life? He said that I have watched my father as I grew up. So, this is the same thing. It's not everything is external. A large part is internal as well. The way you process information makes a lot of difference.
Mm, mm. Wonderful. And also, is there a way that you can tell us that this processing of information, and it differs in people to people, as you told us in this story, is there a, I know there is an easy answer to this, but is there, can there be a watching over of this? Can someone be aware of this processing of information? Is there any?
I think we need to start from ourselves, that instead of comparing the way we look at things and other people look at things, you
Mm,
know, um, we have similar adversities every day, almost every day.
mm,
And then sometimes we get very upset about them. Sometimes we don't get upset about them, right? Let us say that, somebody does not respond to your call. Sometimes you get very angry. Sometimes you don't, right? So sometimes you feel very down, sometimes you don't. Now,
mm,
this is a clear indicator that, your mood also is not exactly the same. Your reactions are not exactly the same every single time an event happens. Now,
mm,
that's because your thoughts are different during these events.
mm. They're
In a
temporary
similar
or
way, yes,
fleeting.
even with the same person, even within yourself, you have different ways of reacting every time. And so is the case with everyone else. Like, everyone can have different feelings about the same event, right?
Mm,
Someone may be anxious, someone may be angry, someone may be depressed, someone may be ashamed or hurt or guilty about a specific event. And this gives us a clue that everyone processes information slightly differently, and
mm,
even the same person processes information slightly differently every time the same thing happens.
mm,
And this is good news because we can change the way we look at things so that our reactions become more helpful in the longer run. They cause us less distress in the longer run.
mm, mm. Wow. Okay. And the second biggest reason of mental health I saw was depression. And I know there are unending questions on depression, but I would want to know from you that when a person is depressed, what is that? Because there are different degrees of depression. So, at what level does the person themselves understand that there is something wrong within me, or not wrong is not the right word, that there is not the way life should be? It's sometimes what happens is I've seen many cases where the way they look at life is already which tends like this is what it is, and I don't need to change anything about anything. Fine, that's also another way of life, and that gets into a very philosophical way of living. But at what point does one actually understand that there's something which is not, which needs treatment?
We call this as insight, that something needs to be fixed within me, right?
Mm,
So insight can be lacking completely with several people, and specifically, certain disorders. For instance, if it is bipolar depression, then insight may be completely lacking,
mm,
specifically in the manic phase, that they may not know, or they may not never become aware that something needs to be fixed in them, right? Or something
mm,
needs to be attended to. They may never have this insight. However, insight can be of varying degrees when it comes to unipolar depression, like what we call as clinical depression,
mm,
where someone may be mildly depressed and they may think that something is wrong with me, and I don't seem to feel right anymore, and I need to seek assistance for it, or there is something that I need to do about it. But someone may be very, very depressed and they may still not have an insight that something is wrong. They may
mm.
still continue to think that it's adversities, and these adversities, only if they change, I everything will be fine. There's
Yeah.
nothing that is wrong in my own reaction. I am kind of more depressed than what would be sufficient to this. So I think it varies from person to person. It varies from disorder to disorder. It varies from a comorbid disorder. For instance, someone who is depressed and does not have a personality disorder would probably have insight earlier, but someone who has a personality disorder and depression may not have a very good insight about depression. So there are a variety of factors. I don't want to burden you, audience, with a lot of information, but I think it varies from person to person. But if you have an insight that there is something needs to be done about it, either I need to seek assistance and I need to do myself something about it, do something about it. And if someone has told you that probably you probably would change your reactions, then seek assistance. So someone may have insight about your problem, and they might just help. It always pays to seek some assistance.
So wonderful. There are so many things that one can have this conversation forever, but I think you are such a person that you would have these kind of topics that really will help people if they're listening. Well, I would really want to say to people who would probably firstly not realize that, as you said already, that they need help, and even if they realize, they see mental health as a taboo, and also probably want to develop something. So what do you have to tell to those people, how they should approach this, and what all happens in morphic minds?
You know what? You don't have to seek help all the time. There are many standard ways in which people can learn these skills. One of them is bibliotherapy. You can learn from reading books. You could listen to podcasts like this secretly. Nobody would know about it. So, the podcast, the psychology podcast, is meant to help people. Definitely not a how to do guide, but it is going to give you more insight about psychological day-to-day issues that we face.
Hmm.
It's also an important tool to assist people who are already undergoing mental health issues or probably treatment.
Hmm.
So I would say there are many ways in which you could help yourself. Bibliotherapy is one, podcast is another. There are YouTube videos that people could use. They could model other people who are coping better. So they could also read history books, how people dealt with adversities better. They could also read autobiographies, not necessarily mental health professionals having written books. So there are multiple ways in which people can help themselves, improve themselves, or their skill set. What happens at Morphic Minds is another question you asked. Quite a few things. I would say Morphic Minds is a training institute. We are affiliated to the International Association of REBT, and we are the leading mental health training institutes in India, where we train a lot of mental health professionals, including psychologists, psychiatrists, and interns as well, into cognitive behavioral therapy and rational emotive behavior therapy. Of course, we also treat patients here, we treat clients here. So a lot of people who come to us um, come for specific help with mental health problems. So this is what we do. We also do preventive work, which is school programs called as core emotional education program that run in schools. We also have support groups that run at the institute. We have them every Thursday. It's done online. So quite a lot of things related to mental health. And now we are producing a lot of video content for social media.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We have a question here from Prasad Mirazar, that how do you see the traditional religious methods to cope with mental health, like prayers and meditation?
All right. So now prayers and meditation have been shown effect to lift your mood, right? However, prayer and meditation may be categorized into. Now, I'm not against it. I do pray and I do meditate as well. I do not want to talk negative about it. Now, strictly speaking, these are what we call as cognitive distraction methods when it comes to emotional upset. So they shift your focus to something that is neutral or positive, and now that may lift your mood. However, this is feeling better, which is, you're already suffering, you're not feeling good, and then you pray or you meditate, you feel better. I would recommend that besides feeling better, not instead of, I would say besides feeling better, you also need to get better. Getting better means responding more adaptively next time when the same adversity happens. Say, for instance, let's say that I had a bad, terrible fight with my family members, and I'm really feeling very angry. That I might pray and I might meditate and I feel better, right? But when the memory of the fight comes back to me, I feel the same anger again, right? Whenever I see the face of the person again, I feel the same anger again. So I'm only feeling better. But if I, let's say, learn a different way of looking at things, So that is getting better. So next time the same thing happens, I am not so angry. I have what we call as healthy anger instead of unhealthy anger. Now this is getting better, where the same adversity happens again and I respond to it differently. So, prayers and meditation may not necessarily always help you get better or teach you a skill how to respond differently next time. You may have to put in conscious effort into getting better, which could be either with medication or cognitive behavioral therapy or learning a skill through the variety of methods that we discussed earlier.
Wonderful. I do see a point here that when we are talking about the skills that you're talking about, these are basically sharpening the mind to use it as tool to
Absolutely.
sail through life, and not only, like, these are all the survival issues that we need to deal with. Whereas prayers and meditation are basically, they were meant for transformative experiences. They were not meant for living life. They were not stress busters, of course.
Mhm.
Wonderful. And I would like you to also talk a little bit about the podcast and what it has, and what are the different topics that you have covered in the podcast.
I have dealt with a variety of topics everyone can relate to. Now, a large majority is negative feelings that I have talked about. So I have talked about feelings, not disorders. Feelings like depression, anxiety as feelings, as emotions. I have dealt with other emotions like jealousy, then shame and guilt. I've also dealt with day-to-day issues like procrastination and how to deal with uncertainty. So it's a part of, like, we have seen a surge in uncertainty in the last and it's with your persistence that I added this topic to it. So thank you, Suramita, for this. I never thought of adding uncertainty and dealing with uncertainty as a topic itself, but I think that that is a cherry on the cake. I would say the a variety of topics that we deal with every day. These are the topics that are included, including relationships, including things at work, and day-to-day feelings. How to cope with these feelings better? What is the purpose of these emotions? And how to use these tools, these emotions, for your betterment instead of getting rid of them. So I do not intend to make people depression free or anxiety free. However, I want to help people manage these and regulate these feelings better and have alternative feelings and behaviors that will help them improve their quality of life, no matter what age they are, what gender they are, what national or geographical background they come from. This is true for all people all over the world. I'm sure that this podcast will help, if they understand my accent, of course. This podcast would help them improve their lives.
Absolutely, it will. And I have heard those podcasts, and we've been very closely working on on these podcasts. I think each and every one of them is useful for any audience that they are listening to, because I think these are very contemporary issues that we have spoken about. And I think they're also, what has happened here is Dr. Palsapure has also spoken some action points to be just watchful. I mean, those are not probably clinical prescriptions, but those are really, really important and productive tools one can pick up to live life. So, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for giving us this time. And I really hope and wish everybody listens to this podcast on Storytel. And also leave the reviews and comments. And if there are any questions, they can leave for you, and you can also get back to them if that can be done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Suramita, and thank you, Storytel, for hosting me. And it's been a wonderful time with you. And I hope that the audience loves the podcast and gives me feedback about how do I make it better so that we can launch another podcast with more topics. And I would love to hear from audience what they want to hear so that we can have another podcast very soon. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.